Every empire in the galaxy knew the first law, a law so old that even the stars it came from had already died, and it was written in every record and taught in every academy. Never wake the humans. Nobody knew why the law existed, because there was no explanation, only silence, but everyone followed it, not out of respect, but out of fear of the unknown, and every star map marked the region of Sol with a dark circle, a forbidden zone where no ship dared to enter, and generations grew up believing that place was cursed. Some said humans had destroyed themselves in war. Others whispered that they had gone to sleep and locked themselves away, but nobody had proof, because nobody ever came back from Earth space. It was an old superstition that still carried weight, until the border wars began. Two empires clashed near the edge of the Forbidden Zone, and in their hunger for resources they drove scavenger crews to search in places that were long abandoned. These scavengers were greedy, desperate, and reckless, and when they saw the black mark on the star charts they laughed at it. One of them, a captain with too many debts to count, sneered at the warning and said, "It's only a ghost story. If humans ever lived here, they are long gone, and if there is treasure waiting, we will be rich." His crew cheered, though some felt the cold shiver of doubt, but they followed him anyway, and so their ships entered the darkness that no one else dared touch. The first thing they found was silence, the kind of silence that made engines seem too loud and the air feel too heavy, and their sensors picked up shapes drifting in the void, half buried in dust and frozen rock, structures that had no record in any database. They pushed closer, and strange machines appeared, rusted towers rising from the husk of a broken world, machines still glowing faintly even though they should have been dead for millennia. The scavengers moved carefully, but greed burned brighter than caution, and when they saw what looked like chambers lined in rows, they landed to investigate. The chambers were filled with capsules, each one holding a figure inside, not quite alive, not quite dead, their faces hidden under a frost that never melted. The crew laughed nervously, calling them relics, calling them corpses, saying they would sell them to collectors as trophies. One alien touched the glass, then another tapped the strange symbols carved into the machines, and one of them pressed a switch that should have done nothing after so long. But the sound came, soft at first, like a heartbeat waking in the dark, and every scavenger froze as the chamber lights began to glow. Dust fell from the walls, and ice cracked across the capsules, as if something inside had heard them. Fear spread, but it was too late. The signal had already been sent, a pulse racing outward faster than light, striking listening posts and relay stations across the galaxy. At first, it was dismissed as noise, an old system rebooting, until the pulse carried with it a voice, distorted but clear. "Do not wake us." The scavengers panicked, trying to undo what they had touched, but the machines did not stop. They only grew louder. One capsule released a hiss of vapor, and the figure inside shifted. The captain shouted for his crew to leave, but the doors sealed themselves with a sound like grinding metal, and the symbols on the walls lit up in blood-red light. Outside their ships reported strange energy surges, power levels spiking beyond measure, and alarms screamed across every deck. Some scavengers begged the captain to send for help, but who would they call? Who would believe them? And even if help came, what power in the galaxy could save them now? On distant worlds, the first signals arrived, and scholars in the great halls of the Galactic Council listened in horror, recognizing the ancient warning for what it truly was. The law had not been superstition. It had been truth, a desperate order carved into time itself to keep something asleep. Now, because of greed, because of carelessness, that order was broken. In the council chambers, the younger species laughed, dismissing it as a trick, but the older ones, the species whose eyes carried the weight of ages, went pale and silent. One elder stood and whispered, "They told us not to wake them, and now someone has." Across the stars, empires began to argue, some saying humans were a myth, others saying humans were monsters, but no one could deny the fact that something had moved. Fleets were ordered to the edge of the Forbidden Zone, yet none dared go too close. Those who tried to listen deeper into the signal claimed they heard more than words. They heard a low rumble beneath the voice, something that shook their bones and made their hearts beat faster, as if the very sound carried fear. The scavengers inside the ruins screamed into their comms, begging for rescue, but their voices ended in static. Their ships, once alive with lights, went dark one by one, drifting lifelessly as if they had never been crewed. Still, the machines on the broken world pulsed brighter, sending waves into the void, a call and an answer, awakening systems that had slept in silence for countless ages. On the edge of known space, an old satellite powered itself on, its surface marked with a faded crust of Earth, and it turned its lens toward the stars as if looking for prey. On another planet, under oceans no one remembered, sealed bunkers opened and released machines that swam upward like shadows. The galaxy shuddered, though most did not yet understand why. They only knew the first law had been broken, and the price of breaking it was already beginning. The galaxy shook the moment the first echo of the human signal reached distant listening posts, faint at first, a soft vibration like a pulse in the dark, barely detectable, yet impossible to ignore, and across star systems, technicians leaned over scanners, eyes widening as readings climbed beyond any known scale. At first some laughed, saying it was a glitch, a resonance from a dying probe or a miscalibrated sensor. But the sound returned, louder now, echoing across the void, and those who tried to block it found it in every channel, every comm line, every receiver, penetrating deep into ships and stations alike, until the message became undeniable, and it carried words in every language, not shouted, not commanding, but calm, cold, and unyielding, repeating slowly, clearly, "Who woke us?" Panic spread in the council halls first as scholars tried to analyze the signal, comparing it to ancient records and forgotten languages, only to discover that the voice was unmistakably human and that it had been asleep for centuries, hidden, silent, a race forgotten by the galaxy, yet still alive, still aware, still waiting, and the realization struck like lightning. The first law of the universe was not superstition, it had been truth, and someone, somewhere, had dared to break it. Across the scattered empires, fleets paused mid-flight, soldiers gripping controls as alarms blared, and even the youngest species who had never believed in humans felt the weight of fear pressing into their minds, because this was no ordinary signal, no cry for help, no distant echo. It was a wake-up call, and it came with power beyond comprehension, sending shivers through every soul listening, and in distant border worlds, those who had entered the Forbidden Zone swore they could feel the presence of the humans around them, vast, silent, and patient, and the first reports came in of ships vanishing without a trace, entire crews frozen in fear as systems failed one by one, engines shutting down, weapons going cold, and the voice continued its rhythm, pulsing through space like a heartbeat, each repetition more chilling than the last. "Who woke us?" The council convened immediately, a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful leaders, and the chamber buzzed with disbelief and fear, older races shaking their heads, whispering that humanity had never truly left, that they had only hidden in silence, that the blank zone on maps was not empty space, but a graveyard of civilizations that had tested the law, and while some argued that this was a bluff, a natural phenomenon misread by eager censors, others spoke quietly, insisting that humans were awake now, and that no empire would survive to understand their limits if they provoked them further. Meanwhile, the scavengers responsible for triggering the awakening were already dead or missing, their transmissions cut short as their ships floated in darkness, hulls locked by forces unseen, and though their greed had caused this, the galaxy soon realized that their punishment was only a warning, a prelude to something far greater. Across the edges of human space, strange energies surged, magnetic fields warped, engines fluctuated, and stars themselves seemed to dim as though acknowledging the return of a species thought long gone, and in every fleet and station that received the signal, fear grew not because humans had attacked, but because the silence that followed was louder than any cannon, and every alien commander suddenly understood that this was not a message. It was a test, a probe into the galaxy's reaction, and a warning of what could follow. Back in the ruins on the Forbidden Planet, The ancient machines hummed, pulses of light streaming through broken circuits, releasing dormant systems, awakening fleets long buried beneath ice and dust, as the voice continued to echo through every sensor, every hull, every mind. Who woke us? No one dared respond, because even the thought of answering seemed dangerous, as if a single sound could summon the humans closer, and the galaxy held its breath, divided between disbelief, awe, and terror, realizing too late that humans had never truly been gone, that their slumber had been deliberate, and that their awakening would mark a turning point, the memory of which would haunt every civilization that had ignored the first law. And as the hum spread through every star system, every listening post, and every fleet, one truth became impossible to ignore. The humans had returned, and the galaxy's greatest mistake was now obvious. Someone had broken the law, someone had awakened them, and the consequences would echo forever through the stars, shaking empires to their core, making the proud tremble, and leaving every being in the galaxy to wonder in whispered fear what the humans would do next. For the signal was not a threat yet, but it was a promise, a slow and deliberate pulse that carried the weight of a civilization beyond reckoning, repeating one question over and over, haunting the void. Who woke us? Far beyond the edges of known space, the story of the awakened humans spread like wildfire, carried by traders, spies, and explorers who had glimpsed the pulse of the signal or felt its presence through failing instruments, and every whisper told a different tale, yet all shared the same truth. Humans were no longer asleep, and the galaxy had underestimated them for countless centuries. And those who had studied ancient histories in secret began to piece together fragments of the past, old records hidden in forgotten vaults, describing humans not as weak, primitive creatures, but as a species that once ruled stars, a civilization so advanced that entire empires had vanished in the blink of an eye, their fleets reduced to drifting debris, their colonies silent, yet no record existed of the humans' last war, only hints of devastation, and the scholars whispered that humans had chosen to sleep, to hide their power from a universe that might have destroyed them, leaving only the first law, a warning carved into every star map. And now, after centuries, that law had been broken, and the humans were waking again, slowly, deliberately, and across the galaxy. Fleets moved with fear instead of confidence. Ships that once carried pride now carried dread, and the scavengers who had triggered the awakening were gone. Their ships found later floating empty, crew missing, doors ripped open, equipment scattered. No trace of life, as if the humans had passed through the ships invisibly. Testing, observing, judging, and on distant worlds, astronomers reported strange lights in the void, flashes that did not match known patterns, energy bursts that defied all known physics, and sensors that went offline without explanation, and the council convened urgently. Ancient leaders staring at holographic projections of the human-claimed sectors, their faces pale beneath ornate helmets, murmuring among themselves, recalling old warnings, old stories that had been dismissed as superstition, yet now seemed true, and fleets that had crossed near the forbidden zone reported systems failing, weapons shutting down mid-activation, engines stalling, and pilots describing an oppressive presence, an awareness that seemed to watch their every move. And in hushed voices the historians reminded the council that humans had been feared once before, a civilization that had mastered space travel, energy manipulation, and warfare beyond imagination, and they had vanished not because they were destroyed, but because they chose to, retreating into silence, leaving only the first law to protect the galaxy from what humans could do if provoked. And now, because of a single careless action, that law was broken, and fear rippled through every corner of the galaxy faster than light, faster than any signal could travel, and even the bravest soldiers began to tremble, wondering what awaited them, because they had seen the first signs: empty ships drifting without crew, energy fields behaving strangely, and in some sectors faint messages appeared on monitors, words repeated in a voice that was calm yet terrifying, words that could not be traced to any source. Who woke us? The whispers grew, Some saying humans had become more than flesh and bone, that their fleet itself was alive, a sentient entity capable of moving without engines, weapons, or lights, and that every ship and installation the humans had left behind was a trap waiting for the right moment to awaken, and rumors spread that small scout ships entering the Forbidden Region had returned empty, and those who claimed to have survived were forever changed, unable to speak of what they had seen, trembling. In the shadows as if haunted, and across council chambers, trading halls, and pirate dens, debates raged, some saying the humans were a myth, a tale used to scare young pilots, but the evidence was mounting, satellites and probes recording impossible energy signatures, and transmissions intercepted that contained strange pulses matching the signal that had awakened them. And no one could explain how a species long thought asleep could manipulate systems so completely, so effortlessly, or appear and disappear at will, and the galaxy began to change its behavior, fleets slowing their movements, scouts avoiding old routes, borders becoming more guarded, all because fear had returned with a vengeance, not just fear of death, but fear of the unknown, fear of a civilization that had once ruled the stars and had chosen to sleep. And as the council convened again, this time in complete secrecy, every leader knew the truth, but could not say it aloud. The humans were awake, the first law had been broken, and the galaxy's past mistakes were about to repeat themselves unless the strongest empires could act wisely. And in the distance, the signal continued its slow, deliberate rhythm, reaching systems far beyond the border, a pulse that reminded everyone, alive or sleeping, that humans were no longer dormant, that the law had been broken, and that the whispers of the past were now reality. An unstoppable force waiting silently for the next move, always watching, always listening. Far beyond the reaches of familiar space, the humans revealed themselves slowly, not with blaring engines or flashing weapons, but in a way that made every fleet stop in awe and fear, for ships began to appear without warning, massive and black, drifting silently through the void. No lights, no noise, yet every scanner picked up impossible readings, holes that seemed to bend reality, energy signatures that defied all known science. And the fleets that had once moved boldly into human space now froze, unsure whether to flee or fight, while aboard each alien vessel, officers whispered to one another, fear cutting through pride, because nothing in the galaxy's history had prepared them for this. And as the humans continued their slow, deliberate approach, one ship from the front lines reported a voice, not broadcast over radios, not intercepted as a signal, but directly inside the minds of every crew member, calm, steady, and chilling, repeating simply, "You broke the law." And at first, some officers thought it was a hallucination, a trick caused by fear, but the next reports confirmed it. The voice spoke across distances light years apart, into minds aboard every vessel that had entered the Forbidden Zone, and the words were neither a threat nor a command, only a statement of fact, yet the weight of it shook entire fleets, engines stalling, weapons freezing, systems glitching as if the ships themselves obeyed an unseen hand. And when the alien admirals tried to order an attack, they found their voices gone, commands lost, controls unresponsive, as if every human ship had reached through the void and claimed authority over them, and the silence that followed was heavier than any battle, more terrifying than any weapon, because it proved that humans did not need to fire to destroy, that their mere presence could cripple fleets and crush pride. And slowly, from the dark, more ships appeared, larger than anything seen before, some shaped like shards of night, others like floating mountains, every surface lined with strange symbols that glowed faintly with cold light, and the fleets trembling before them realized that these were not ordinary warships. They were extensions of the humans themselves, a silent army, waiting, watching, judging, and the first reports of scouts sent toward them returned with static-filled transmissions. But inside the broken signals was a single repeated word, "Do not approach," and the longer the fleet stayed, the more systems failed, as if the humans had studied every known technology and learned how to manipulate it across light years without touching a single control panel. and whispers spread among the crews that these were not just machines, but intelligent extensions of humans, capable of anticipating every move before it was made, and fear turned to panic as entire formations could not move, engines refusing to ignite, shields dropping, weapons locking, and the alien soldiers realized that they were trapped not by force but by knowledge, by preparation, by patience, and still the humans did not fire. They did not roar across space. They only drifted silently, their presence overwhelming, their purpose clear, and one admiral shouted for retreat, but the voice returned in their minds, calm, deliberate, cold. You were warned, and the message echoed in every corner of the galaxy that dared cross into human space, leaving fleets paralyzed and commanders shaking, and as the silence stretched, the humans began to manipulate gravity fields and space around the enemy ships, bending light, shifting positions, causing instruments to read impossible distances, making it seem as if fleets were lost in a void even larger than known space, and with every passing moment the truth became undeniable. Humans had been waiting for this day. They had never been gone, never been weak, only dormant, and now that they were awake, they did not need to fight to win, for fear itself had become their weapon, their fleets, their presence, the simple act of being in space, bending the galaxy to their will. And finally, one bold scout reported seeing a single human figure aboard a ship larger than any station, standing at the bridge, as if observing all the trapped fleets simultaneously, and when the figure spoke, it was not a command but a quiet reminder. You broke the first law, and that was all. Yet it was enough to shatter confidence, pride, and courage in every being who had dared approach, proving that the humans were no longer myth, no longer asleep, and no one in the galaxy would ever forget the day the silent fleet revealed the true power of Earth. The galaxy had never known fear like this before, not the fear of battle, not the fear of death, but a deep, cold fear that crept into every mind, for news of the humans' awakening spread faster than any signal, faster than any fleet could travel, and every empire, every colony, every isolated outpost felt the weight of it. Whispers of the silent fleet reached markets and councils alike, and those who had once mocked the legends now trembled at the very mention of Earth, because fleets that had once been proud were reduced to trembling wrecks, captains unable to speak, crews frozen in terror, as if the humans had reached into their minds, and entire colonies went dark without explanation, communication lost as if the humans were not just ships but shadows that could snuff out life with thought alone, and in council halls across star systems, leaders shouted, debated, and pleaded for answers. But the older races who had survived past human wars only whispered quietly among themselves, remembering the first stories, the forgotten massacres, the vanished empires, and now they realized the warnings were true. Humanity had never been weak, it had only waited, and now it had returned, and every empire that had broken the first law felt its weight pressing down like a hand of ice, and fleets that had once scouted boldly now stayed at home, engines idling, weapons locked, signals muted, because no one dared challenge a species that could bend reality itself without firing a shot. And the scavengers who had first awakened the humans were gone, their ships drifting in silence, evidence of the mercy humans could show, and yet their absence was also proof of the power humans wielded, because no trace remained, not a body, not a signal, only whispers of fear and awe. And as these stories spread, rumors began to take shape, some saying humans were guarding a hidden weapon, others claiming humans were themselves a weapon, alive, intelligent and unstoppable, and the galaxy listened in terror to the pulse of the human signal, repeating slowly, steadily, "You were warned," reaching systems far beyond the edges of known space, shaking the foundations of empires that thought themselves immortal, and in pirate dens, smugglers who had once scoffed at the idea of Earth now locked their doors, shivering as they spoke the name in hushed voices, for fear was contagious, spreading faster than fleets could travel, faster than logic could contain, and in the council, the debate grew desperate, some calling for fleets to strike preemptively, to destroy whatever humans remained, while others begged for restraint, insisting that any attack would be suicide, because humans did not fight like ordinary species. They acted with patience, precision, and unseen power, and fleets that tested boundaries vanished instantly, leaving nothing but silence and dread in their wake. And in every sector, scouts reported strange occurrences, ships vanishing without warning, stations going offline, strange distortions in space where gravity and energy behaved as if alive. And the more the galaxy tried to investigate, the more impossible it became. The humans remained always just out of reach, silent, calm, patient, their presence more powerful than any fleet, and the stories grew darker, of colonies found empty, of weapons locked mid-fire, of entire star systems trembling as if the humans were watching, and everywhere the message echoed, not through comms but in minds, in hearts, repeating one sentence that had begun centuries ago. Do not wake us. And the galaxy realized too late that breaking the first law was not just a mistake. It was an act that had awakened an intelligence far beyond comprehension, a force that could strike or spare at will, and the fear that followed was unlike war, unlike famine, unlike plague. It was fear of the unknown made real, fear of the very species that had once ruled the stars, and in quiet corners of the galaxy. Species that had never allied before began to communicate secretly, forming pacts, treaties, and silent agreements to avoid human space at all costs, knowing that any trespass could provoke retaliation that was precise, intelligent, and unstoppable. And the legend grew, whispered in every language, a cautionary tale repeated to children and soldiers alike, that humans had returned, that the first law had been broken, and that the galaxy's arrogance had awakened a force that would never sleep again. And though humans had not yet struck directly, their mere presence reshaped strategy, politics, and thought across light years, until every being who had once mocked their silence understood one undeniable truth. The humans were awake, and fear itself had become their weapon. The galaxy now a stage for a presence it could neither fight nor ignore, and in that realization, leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike trembled, knowing that the return of humanity had changed everything. And nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy waited in tense silence, every fleet at anchor, every council chamber empty except for whispers, as if the stars themselves held their breath, because the humans, who had been dormant for centuries, were awake now, and no one truly knew what that meant. And then it became clear, slowly, in terrifying clarity, that the first law had never been meant to protect the galaxy from humans. It had been meant to protect humans from themselves, for centuries ago they had wielded power so great that entire civilizations had vanished in the blink of an eye, planets reduced to dust, fleets erased, and now, awakened, they had chosen patience, observing the galaxy, measuring every action, testing every empire without striking, and yet their presence alone reshaped every system, for energy fields shifted where no engines moved, sensors recorded impossible readings, and every command issued by alien admirals faltered as if the humans had reached across the void and touched their minds. And, though they had not attacked, the fear was absolute, a living, breathing weight that pressed into every being, because even without fire or blades, humans had reminded the galaxy that their power could be applied at any moment, and the signal continued, faint, steady, a single voice that carried across light years, repeating the chilling reminder. You broke the law, and all who heard it understood immediately that this was not a threat, nor a warning, nor a prelude to conquest. It was a statement of fact, a judgment, a truth that could not be ignored, and in every corner of space, from the richest empires to the smallest colonies, fleets and governments trembled, wondering if the humans would act or continue their silent observation, for even the most reckless species had begun to treat Earth as untouchable, mapping routes that would avoid human space entirely, whispering the old stories to younger generations, telling children not of monsters, but of patience and power beyond imagination. And the humans had returned not to destroy, not to conquer, but to enforce a presence that no one could challenge, a force that reshaped the galaxy without firing a single shot, and the leaders of empires who had once ruled with arrogance now fell silent in fear, knowing that the humans' return had changed the rules entirely, that diplomacy was meaningless, fleets were powerless, and survival depended on restraint. And across the void, fleets sent to probe or test boundaries vanished without a trace. Crews found floating lifelessly, equipment scattered, the only evidence being faint traces of energy and a slow pulse in space that matched the human's rhythm, and scholars pieced together fragments from ancient texts, realizing that humans had never truly left, only slept, and that their withdrawal had been deliberate, a choice to prevent total annihilation, to hide their power until the galaxy was ready or forced to obey. And now that choice had ended. The first law had been broken, and the humans could not return to slumber. They were awake, and the galaxy's mistakes had awakened a civilization beyond reckoning, a species that could act or wait, strike or spare, that could erase fleets with thought alone, that could bend space, energy, and minds without touching a single control panel. And yet, despite all this, the humans did not attack. They only watched, silently, patiently, their ships moving without sound, their presence bending reality itself. And the pulse of their signal continued to echo across the stars, embedding a single undeniable truth into every mind that listened, a truth that was simple yet terrifying. Humanity had returned, the first law had been broken, and the galaxy would never be the same again. And as whispers spread to every system, a final understanding settled like ice in every heart. Humans were not a force to fight, not a fleet to evade, not even a planet to avoid carelessly. They were the law itself, patient, watching, capable of unimaginable destruction, and their silence was more deadly than any war, more powerful than any weapon, for it carried the promise that the universe would be shaped by them alone if provoked, and every empire, every leader, every pilot and citizen understood that survival no longer depended on firepower or cunning or alliances. It depended on remembering one fact above all: never break the law again. Never awaken what sleeps. Never challenge the humans, for they had returned to remind the galaxy why the first law had existed, why their power had been hidden, and why now, more than ever, humanity would remain the shadow over every star, silent, eternal, and unyielding. And with that final revelation, fleets drifted, councils fell silent, colonies paused, and the stars themselves seemed to bow in awe as humanity, patient and supreme, watched, waited, and reminded the galaxy that breaking the first law was the gravest mistake any being could ever make.